Maya's hands were shaking as she stood in front of the huge glass building. She looked up at the golden letters that spelled out Montgomery Industries and took a deep breath. This was it. The job interview that could change her life forever. She had been looking for work for 3 months now. Every rejection letter felt like a punch to the stomach. Her college friends were already working at good companies, posting pictures of their fancy offices on social media. Maya tried not to feel jealous, but it was hard. She knew she was smart and hardworking, but somehow the right opportunity just hadn't come her way yet. When the email came from Montgomery Industries asking her to come in for an interview, Maya almost thought it was a joke. This was one of the biggest companies in New York. The CEO, Richard Montgomery, was famous for being a self-made billionaire. She had seen his face on magazine covers and business news shows. He was the kind of person who seemed to live in a completely different world from hers. Maya checked her reflection in the glass door one more time. She had bought this navy blue suit with her last paycheck from her part-time job at the coffee shop. It wasn't expensive, but it looked professional. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she had practiced her answers to common interview questions at least 50 times. The lobby was like nothing she had ever seen before. The ceiling was so high it made her feel tiny. There were real marble floors and paintings that probably cost more than her dad made in a year. Business people in expensive suits walked around talking on their phones, looking important and busy. Maya walked up to the reception desk, trying to look more confident than she felt. The receptionist was a woman in her 30s with perfect makeup and a friendly smile. "Good morning, I'm Maya Johnson. I have an interview at 10 o'clock. "Of course, Miss Johnson. Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Maya found a leather chair that was more comfortable than her bed at home. She looked around at the other people waiting. They all seemed to belong here. Their clothes fit perfectly. Their briefcases looked expensive. And they had this air of confidence that Maya wished she could borrow for just 1 hour. On the wall opposite her was a huge portrait of Richard Montgomery himself. He looked younger in the painting than in recent photos she had seen online. His eyes seemed to be looking right at her, which made her feel nervous. She knew he probably wouldn't even be involved in her interview. Someone at his level wouldn't waste time talking to someone like her. 20 minutes passed before a young man in a crisp white shirt approached her. "Miss Johnson? Mr. Montgomery will see you now." Maya's heart almost stopped. "Mr. Montgomery? Are you sure?" "Yes, please follow me." They walked through hallways lined with more expensive art. Maya tried to remember everything her dad had taught her about making a good first impression. Stand up straight, make eye contact, give a firm handshake. She could do this. The man knocked on a door with CEO written in gold letters, then opened it. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Johnson is here for her interview." Richard Montgomery looked up from his desk, and Maya got her first real look at the man she had only seen in pictures. He was taller than she expected, with gray hair at his temples and wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. But what struck her most was how tired he looked, like he carried some heavy burden that money couldn't fix. "Thank you. James, please come in, Miss Johnson." Maya walked into the office, trying not to stare at everything around her. The room was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the entire city below. She felt like she was in a movie. "Please have a seat," Richard said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Maya sat down and immediately wished she had worn longer sleeves. The air conditioning was strong, and she felt goosebumps on her arms. She started to roll down her sleeves when Richard began speaking. "So, Maya, tell me why you're interested in working at Montgomery Industries." This was a question she had practiced. Maya launched into her prepared answer about wanting to be part of a company that valued innovation and growth. As she spoke, she noticed Richard wasn't really listening. His eyes kept moving to her left wrist. Maya looked down and realized her sleeve had rolled up slightly, showing the crescent-shaped birthmark she had always had. It was about the size of a quarter, dark against her brown skin. Her dad used to tell her it made her special, that it was like a little moon watching over her. She quickly pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. Richard's face had gone completely white. He stood up from his chair so fast that he knocked over his coffee cup. The hot liquid spread across his desk, but he didn't even seem to notice. "That mark on your wrist," he said in a voice that was barely a whisper. "Where did you get it?" Maya felt confused and a little scared. I was born with it. It's just a birthmark." Richard was staring at her like he had seen a ghost. His hands were shaking as he reached for some tissues to clean up the spilled coffee. "Who are your parents?" he asked. "My father is David Johnson. My mother passed away when I was little." Maya didn't understand why he was asking these personal questions, but something in his voice made her answer. Richard sat back down heavily in his chair. He kept staring at her face like he was trying to memorize it or like he was seeing someone else entirely. "Miss Johnson, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cut this interview short. Something urgent has come up." Maya felt her heart sink. She had blown it somehow. Maybe he didn't like her answers, or maybe she just wasn't what he was looking for. "Of course I understand. Thank you for your time, Mr. Montgomery." She stood up to leave, but Richard called her name. "Maya, wait." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "We'll be in touch." As Maya walked out of the office, she felt completely defeated. The interview had lasted less than 10 minutes. She had probably said something wrong, or maybe he could just tell she didn't belong in a place like this. She took the elevator down to the lobby, past all the important-looking people, past the marble floors and expensive art. Outside on the busy street, she felt like she could breathe again. Maya pulled out her phone to call her dad. She needed to hear his voice, needed him to tell her that everything would be okay like he always did. But as she walked toward the subway station, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Richard Montgomery had looked at her. It wasn't disappointment or dislike. It was something else entirely, something that looked almost like recognition, like he knew something about her that she didn't know about herself. The birthmark on her wrist seemed to throb slightly under her sleeve. She had never thought much about it before. It was just part of her, like her brown eyes or the small scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike as a kid. But the way Richard had stared at it, the way his whole demeanor had changed when he saw it, made her wonder if there was more to this simple mark than she had ever realized. As the subway train pulled into the station, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this strange interview was just the beginning of something much bigger. Maya's phone rang 3 times before her dad picked up. She was still on the subway, heading back to her apartment in Queens, but she needed to hear his voice. "Hey, sweetheart, how did the interview go?" Just hearing David Johnson's warm, familiar voice made Maya feel a little better. Her dad had always been her anchor, the one person she could count on no matter what. "Dad, it was really weird. I think I messed it up somehow." "What happened? Did they ask you trick questions?" Maya looked around the subway car. A few other passengers were nearby, so she lowered her voice. "The CEO interviewed me himself, which was already strange, but then he saw my birthmark and got really upset. He ended the interview after like 10 minutes. There was silence on the other end of the line. Maya thought maybe the call had dropped. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here, baby girl." His voice sounded different now, heavier somehow.
"Maya, I need you to come home tonight."
"There's something important we need to talk about." "Is everything okay? You sound worried. Just come home, okay? I'll make dinner." "We need to have a conversation that's long overdue." The call ended, leaving Maya more confused than before. Her dad never talked like that. David Johnson was the most straightforward person she knew. He fixed cars for a living and spoke in simple, honest terms. When something was broken, he figured out how to fix it. When Maya had problems, he helped her work through them. He didn't do mysterious phone calls or urgent family meetings. Maya spent the rest of the subway ride trying to figure out what could be so important. Maybe he was sick and had been hiding it from her. Maybe there were money problems he hadn't told her about. The possibilities running through her head made her stomach twist with worry. When she got to her apartment, Maya changed out of her interview clothes and into jeans and a sweater. She looked at herself in the mirror, automatically glancing at the birthmark on her wrist. She had never really thought about it much before today. It was just part of her, like her height or the dimple in her left cheek. But now she found herself really studying it. The mark was shaped like a crescent moon, dark brown against her skin. She tried to remember if anyone had ever asked her about it before. A few doctors over the years had noticed it during checkups, but they always said it was completely normal. So why had Richard Montgomery reacted so strongly to seeing it? The drive to her childhood home in Queens took 40 minutes. Maya had moved out after college, wanting to be independent, but she still came home for dinner at least twice a week. David had raised her alone since her mother died when Maya was 7, and they were closer than most fathers and daughters. The house looked exactly the same as it had when she was growing up. Small, neat, with a tiny front yard that David kept perfectly maintained. His pickup truck was in the driveway, the one with Johnson Auto Repair painted on the side. Maya used her key to let herself in. The smell of her dad's famous spaghetti and meatballs filled the house, but David was nowhere to be seen. She found him in the garage, not working on a car like usual, but sitting on an old wooden crate with a cardboard box in his lap. "Dad?" David looked up, and Maya was shocked to see tears in his eyes. In 22 years, she had seen her father cry exactly twice. Once when her mother died, and once when Maya graduated from college. "Come sit down, sweetheart." Maya sat on another crate facing him. The garage was David's favorite place to think. It was where he had taught her how to change oil, how to check tire pressure, how to be self-sufficient. Some of her best memories were in this garage. "Maya, I need to tell you something that I should have told you years ago. I was waiting for the right time, but I'm starting to think there never would have been a right time." Maya's heart was pounding. "Dad, you're scaring me." David opened the cardboard box and pulled out a stack of old photographs and some official-looking papers. His hands were shaking slightly. 22 years ago, I was working as a night janitor at Mount Sinai Hospital. It was my second job, something I did to make extra money after working at the garage all day. He paused, struggling to find the right words. "One night, a young woman gave birth there. She was alone, no family with her. The baby was healthy and beautiful, but the mother left the next morning without the child." Maya felt like the world had tilted sideways. "What are you saying?" The nurses didn't know what to do. There was no father listed on any paperwork, no family to contact. The mother had left a note saying she wanted the baby to go to someone who could give her a better life than she could provide. David pulled out a yellowed piece of paper from the box. Maya could see handwriting on it, but her eyes were too blurry with tears to read it. "I had been cleaning the hospital for 3 years. The nurses knew me, trusted me. I had told them about losing your mother, about how much I wanted to give you a sibling but couldn't afford adoption fees." His voice broke a little. "They asked if I would consider taking the baby. Just temporarily, they said, until they could find a proper family." Maya couldn't speak. Her whole world was crashing down around her. "But the moment I held you, Maya, I knew I couldn't let you go. You looked up at me with these big brown eyes and you wrapped your tiny finger around mine, and that was it. You were my daughter, so I'm adopted?" Maya's voice came out as a whisper. "Legally, yes, but in every way that matters, you're my daughter. You always have been." David reached into the box again and pulled out more papers. The mother had left some information. Her first name was Alicia. She was young, maybe 19 or 20. Educated, the nurses said. She spoke well, seemed intelligent. But she was terrified. What about my biological father? She never mentioned him. The space for father's name on all the paperwork was left blank. David looked directly at Maya. "But there was one thing that made you easy to identify. You had this distinctive birthmark on your wrist. The nurses said the mother kept touching it like she was trying to memorize it." Maya looked down at her wrist, and suddenly everything from the interview made sense. Richard Montgomery's reaction, the way he had stared at her, the questions about her parents. "Dad, the man I interviewed with today, asked about my birthmark." He looked like he recognized it somehow. David nodded slowly. "Maya, I need to show you something else." He pulled out a newspaper clipping from 23 years ago. It was from the society pages, showing a young couple at some fancy charity event. The headline read, "Montgomery heir engaged to politician's daughter." Maya looked at the photo and gasped. The young man in the picture looked exactly like Richard Montgomery, just 20 years younger. But it was the woman next to him that made Maya's blood run cold. She was white, blonde, nothing like what Maya had imagined her mother looking like. "This isn't her," David said quietly. "This is the woman he married." "But Maya, look at the date on this newspaper." Maya checked the date. It was from exactly 9 months before she was born. "I've done some research over the years," David continued. "Not because I wanted to intrude on your life, but because I thought someday you might want to know. Richard Montgomery was engaged to Elizabeth Whitmore when you were conceived. They had a big society wedding 6 months after you were born. So you think he might be? I think it's possible. The timing fits. And his reaction to seeing your birthmark today suggests he might know something about where it came from." Maya felt like she was going to be sick. The man she had interviewed with, the billionaire CEO who had stared at her like he'd seen a ghost, might be her biological father. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" David put the papers back in the box and reached for Maya's hands. "Because you had a good life. You were happy, you did well in school, you had friends. What good would it have done to tell you that your birth parents gave you up? I wanted you to feel wanted, loved, secure. I did feel those things. I do feel those things. Maya squeezed her dad's hands. You're the best father anyone could ask for. But this changes everything, doesn't it? It doesn't change how much I love you. It doesn't change that you're my daughter. But if Richard Montgomery is your biological father, then yes, it might change some other things. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Maya tried to process everything she had learned. Her entire identity, everything she thought she knew about herself had just been turned upside down. What do I do now? She asked. David smiled sadly. That's up to you, sweetheart. You're an adult now, but whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Maya looked at the cardboard box full of secrets that had been hidden for over 20 years. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to leave the past buried or to find out the truth about who she really was. Maya couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything her father had told her. Every few minutes she would look at the birthmark on her wrist, wondering if it really was the key to unlocking a mystery that had been hidden for over 20 years. By morning, she had made up her mind. She needed to know the truth. Maya spent the next week doing research. She went to the public library and looked up old newspaper articles about Richard Montgomery and his family. She searched online for any information she could find about his past, his business dealings, his personal life. What she discovered painted a picture of a man who had built his empire from almost nothing, but who had always seemed to keep his private life very private. There were articles about his marriage to Elizabeth Whitmore, the daughter of a prominent state senator. Their wedding had been called the social event of the year 22 years ago. But the more Maya dug, the more she noticed something interesting. In all the photos from around the time she was born, Richard Montgomery looked unhappy. Even on his wedding day, his smile seemed forced. His wife, Elizabeth, always looked perfect in the pictures, but Richard seemed like he was somewhere else entirely. Maya also found some information about the Montgomery family business around that time. Richard's father, William Montgomery, had been a tough businessman who expected his son to marry well and produce heirs who could carry on the family name. The marriage to Elizabeth had apparently been as much about business connections as it was about love. After a week of research, Maya decided she needed to talk to someone who might have known Richard Montgomery back then. She remembered seeing the name of his college roommate mentioned in an old article. The man, Peter Chen, now ran a small accounting firm in Manhattan. Maya called his office and managed to get an appointment by saying she was working on a research project about successful business partnerships. It wasn't exactly a lie. Peter Chen was in his mid-40s with kind eyes and an easy smile. His office was nothing like the fancy Montgomery Industries building, but it felt warm and welcoming. So you're interested in Richard Montgomery? Peter asked after Maya explained her supposed research project. I haven't talked to him in years, but we were close once upon a time. What was he like in college? Maya asked, trying to sound casual. Brilliant, driven, but also conflicted. His father had very specific plans for Richard's life, and Richard didn't always agree with them. Peter leaned back in his chair. He was expected to marry someone from the right family, take over the business, live a very prescribed life. Did he ever rebel against those expectations? Peter smiled. Actually, yes. There was a time in his early 20s when he was seeing someone his father definitely wouldn't have approved of. A young woman named Alicia Thompson. She was brilliant, working as a financial analyst at his father's company. Maya's heart started racing. Alicia Thompson? Beautiful girl, incredibly smart. Richard was head over heels for her, but it was complicated because… Peter paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Well, let's just say his father had very old-fashioned ideas about who was suitable for his son. Maya understood what he wasn't saying directly. What happened to their relationship? It ended suddenly. One day Richard was talking about how much he cared for her, and the next week he was engaged to Elizabeth Whitmore. He never talked about Alicia again, but I could tell something had broken inside him. Do you know what happened to Alicia? Peter shook his head. She left the company around the same time. I heard she moved away from New York, but I never knew where she went. Maya left the meeting with more questions than answers. But at least she had confirmed that Alicia Thompson was real, and that she had been involved with Richard Montgomery around the time Maya was born. That evening, Maya decided to take a different approach. She went back to Mount Sinai Hospital and asked to speak with someone in the records department. She explained that she was looking for information about her own birth and adoption. The woman behind the desk was sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, but we can't release information about births from that long ago without proper legal documentation. And even then, if it was a private adoption, those records might be sealed." Maya was about to give up when an older nurse walking by overheard their conversation. "Excuse me," the nurse said. "Did you say you were born here 22 years ago and adopted?" "Yes, ma'am." The nurse, whose name tag read Gloria, studied Maya's face carefully. "What's your name, honey?" "Maya Johnson." Gloria's eyes widened slightly. "I've been working here for 30 years. I remember that case. You were the baby with the crescent birthmark." Maya's pulse quickened. "You remember me?" "How could I forget? That was one of the most unusual situations I ever dealt with. Your birth mother was so young and scared. She wouldn't tell us much about herself, but she was clearly educated, well-spoken. And she was adamant that the baby should go to a good family. Do you remember anything else about her?" Gloria looked around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. "She had that same birthmark you have. On her shoulder, I think. She kept saying it was a family trait, something special. She made us promise that if anyone ever came looking for the baby, we should look for that mark." "Did anyone ever come looking?" "Not that I know of. But honey, I got the feeling that your mother expected someone might. She seemed like she was protecting someone, maybe the father." Maya thanked Gloria and left the hospital with her head spinning. Her birth mother had the same birthmark, which meant it really was a family trait, and she had seemed to expect that Maya's father might come looking for her someday. That night, Maya did more internet searching, this time focusing on Alicia Thompson. It took hours, but she finally found an obituary from 5 years earlier. Alicia Thompson had died in a car accident in California at the age of 38. She had been working as a financial consultant and had never married. But the obituary mentioned that she was survived by her parents and a sister. Maya found contact information for the sister, Lisa Thompson, who still lived in California. Maya spent 2 days working up the courage to make the phone call. When she finally did, her hands were shaking. "Hello, is this Lisa Thompson?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Maya Johnson. I'm calling about your sister Alicia. I think she might have been my birth mother." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I've been wondering when this call would come," Lisa finally said. "Alicia told me about the baby she gave up. She said someday the child might come looking for answers. She told you about me?" "She told me everything." "About Richard Montgomery, about the impossible situation they were in, about the choice she had to make." Lisa's voice was gentle but sad. "Alicia never got over giving you up, honey. She thought about you every single day. Can you tell me what happened? Why did she give me up?" Lisa sighed. "It's a long story and not all of it is pretty. But if you really want to know, I think you deserve the truth." For the next hour, Lisa told Maya the story her sister had shared with her 22 years earlier. Richard and Alicia had met at work and fallen deeply in love. But when Alicia got pregnant, both of their families had pressured them to end the relationship. Richard's father had threatened to disown him and destroy his business future if he didn't marry Elizabeth Whitmore as planned. Alicia's own parents, while loving, were terrified of the scandal and the problems their daughter and grandchild would face. It was a different time, Lisa explained. The social pressures were enormous. Alicia felt like keeping the baby would ruin Richard's life and limit the child's opportunities. But why didn't they fight for each other? They were young and scared, and everyone around them was telling them it was impossible. Alicia made Richard promise never to look for the baby, thinking it would be better for everyone if he moved on with his life. Did he know about the birthmark? Oh yes, Richard had the same mark on his shoulder. Alicia said it was like a sign that you belonged to both of them. She used to touch your little birthmark and tell you that your father carried the same mark, that even though you couldn't be together, you would always be connected. Maya was crying now, thinking about the mother she had never known touching her birthmark and talking about a father who had been forced to give her up. "Lisa, do you think Richard Montgomery knows I exist?" "Honey, based on what Alicia told me, I think he's been carrying that secret for 22 years. And if he saw that birthmark of yours, I guarantee you he knows exactly who you are." Armed with the truth about her past, Maya knew she had to face Richard Montgomery again. But this time she wouldn't be going as a job applicant. She would be going as his daughter. Maya spent 3 days planning what she would say. She practiced the conversation in her mirror with her dad, even with her reflection in store windows as she walked down the street. But nothing could really prepare her for what she was about to do. She called Montgomery Industries and asked for an appointment with Richard Montgomery. When his assistant asked what it was regarding, Maya simply said it was a personal matter that Mr. Montgomery would want to discuss. To her surprise, they scheduled her for the very next day. Maya arrived at the Montgomery Industries building wearing the same navy suit she had worn to her first interview. But this time she felt completely different. She wasn't nervous about getting a job anymore. She was nervous about confronting the man who might be her father, with a truth that could change both of their lives forever. The same receptionist greeted her, and the same assistant, James, came to escort her to Richard's office. But when they reached the CEO's suite, James seemed surprised. "Mr. Montgomery asked to meet with you in the conference room instead of his office today," James explained, leading her down the hall to a room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long wooden table. Richard Montgomery was already there, standing by the windows looking out at the city. When Maya entered, he turned around and she could see that he looked like he hadn't slept much in the past 2 weeks. "Thank you for coming." "Maya, please sit down." Maya chose a chair halfway down the long table. Richard sat across from her, his hands folded in front of him. "I've been thinking about our last meeting every day since it happened," Richard said quietly. "That birthmark on your wrist, I haven't been able to get it out of my mind." Maya took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Mr. Montgomery, I need to ask you something directly. Do you have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon?" Richard's face went pale, just like it had during their first meeting. Slowly, he rolled up his left sleeve and pushed his shirt off his shoulder. There on his upper arm was an identical crescent-shaped mark to the one Maya carried on her wrist. "I've had this mark since birth," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My grandmother had it too. It runs in the Montgomery family." Maya stood up and walked over to him. She rolled up her own sleeve, placing her wrist next to his shoulder. The marks were exactly the same size, the same shape, the same dark color. "Hi, sir," Maya said, her voice trembling. "My father shares the same birthmark." Richard stared at the 2 matching marks for a long moment, then looked up at Maya's face. Tears were running down his cheeks. "Alicia," he whispered, "you look just like Alicia. You knew my mother. I loved your mother." Richard sat down heavily in his chair. "I loved her more than I've ever loved anyone in my life, and I had to give her up because I was a coward." "Tell me what happened." "I need to hear it from you." Richard was quiet for a long moment, collecting his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was filled with regret. "I was 24 years old and thought I knew everything. My father had arranged my engagement to Elizabeth Whitmore before I even met her. It was a business deal disguised as a marriage. Elizabeth's father was a powerful politician, and my father wanted those connections." He stood up and walked back to the window. "But then I met Alicia at work. She was the smartest person I'd ever encountered, beautiful inside and out. She challenged me, made me want to be better than I was. We tried to keep our relationship secret, but we fell in love anyway." "What happened when she got pregnant?" "When Alicia told me she was pregnant, I was terrified, but also excited. I wanted to marry her, to build a life together. But when my father found out," Richard shook his head, "he threatened to destroy me. Cut me off completely, ruin my career, make sure I never worked in business again." "And Alicia's family? They were scared too. They loved Alicia, but they knew what kind of life she and our child would have if we stayed together. The whispers, the judgment, the limited opportunities. Everyone was telling us it was impossible." Richard turned back to face Maya. "We were young and we listened to everyone else instead of following our hearts. Alicia made me promise to let her handle everything, to go through with my engagement to Elizabeth and never look back. But you did look back. Every single day for 22 years. I married Elizabeth because I thought it was what I was supposed to do, but I never stopped thinking about Alicia or wondering about our child." Maya felt a mix of anger and sadness. "You could have fought for us. You're right. I should have. I was a coward, and that cowardice cost me the most important things in my life." Richard's voice broke. "I've regretted that decision every day since. What about your marriage to Elizabeth?" "We divorced 10 years ago. We never had children together. Elizabeth knew I wasn't really present in our marriage. That part of me was always somewhere else. She deserved better than that. Maya walked back to her chair and sat down. I found out that Alicia died 5 years ago. Richard's face crumbled. I know. I've been keeping track of her from a distance all these years. When I learned she had died, I thought any chance of making amends was gone forever. She never married. Her sister told me she never got over giving me up. And I never got over giving both of you up. Richard looked directly at Maya. When I saw your birthmark 2 weeks ago, I knew immediately who you were. You have Alicia's eyes, her smile, her way of carrying herself. But you also have the Montgomery family mark. They sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what they were discussing. What happens now? Maya finally asked. That's entirely up to you, Richard said. I gave up the right to make decisions about your life 22 years ago. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try to be part of your life now. I already have a father. David Johnson raised me, loved me, gave me everything I needed. He's my real father. I know that, and I have no intention of trying to replace him. David Johnson did what I was too scared to do. He stepped up when you needed someone, and I will always be grateful to him for that. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I've written him a letter. I wanted to thank him for raising the daughter I was too much of a coward to claim. Would you give this to him for me? Maya took the envelope, surprised by the gesture. I've also set up a scholarship fund in Alicia's name, Richard continued. It's for young women who want to study business and finance. I should have done it years ago. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. I can't change the past, Maya. But I can try to honor your mother's memory, and maybe help other young women who are in situations similar to what she faced. Maya looked at this man, who was her biological father, seeing him clearly for the first time. He wasn't the confident billionaire from magazine covers. He was a person who had made a terrible mistake when he was young and had been living with the consequences ever since. I don't know if I can call you Dad, Maya said honestly. I don't expect you to. I haven't earned that title. But maybe if you're willing, we could start as friends and see where it goes from there. Maya thought about everything she had learned over the past few weeks. About the mother who had loved her enough to give her up, about the father who had been forced to let her go, and about the man who had chosen to raise her as his own. I'd like that, she said finally. But David Johnson will always be my father. You'll have to be something else. Richard smiled for the first time since she had walked into the room. I'll be whatever you need me to be, Maya. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the 22 years I missed. As Maya left the Montgomery Industries building that day, she realized that her life had just gotten infinitely more complicated. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like she understood who she really was and where she had come from. The birthmark on her wrist was no longer just a mark. It was a connection to a family she had never known she had, and a reminder that sometimes the most important truths are hidden in the smallest details. 3 months had passed since Maya learned the truth about her parentage, and life had settled into a new kind of normal. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. Maya was sitting in her apartment on a Saturday morning when her phone rang. It was Richard, which still felt strange but was becoming more familiar. Good morning, Maya. I hope I'm not calling too early. No, it's fine. I've been up for a while. Maya had gotten into the habit of weekend morning calls with Richard. They were still figuring out how to have a relationship, taking it slow and letting things develop naturally. I wanted to ask you something. Elizabeth and I are having dinner tomorrow night, and I was wondering if you'd like to join us. Maya was surprised. Richard's ex-wife had reached out to Maya a month earlier, wanting to meet the daughter she had never known existed. It had been an awkward but ultimately positive meeting. Elizabeth wants to see me again? She does. She said she enjoyed talking with you last time, and she wanted to get to know you better. I think she feels bad about the role she played in our family situation all those years ago. Maya had come to understand that Elizabeth wasn't a villain in this story. She had been young too, trapped in an arranged marriage with a man who was in love with someone else. When she learned about Maya's existence, Elizabeth had been shocked but not angry. Okay, I'll come to dinner, but I want to invite someone. Of course, David. Yes, and also someone else you haven't met yet. Her name is Lisa Thompson. She's my aunt. After Maya had connected with Alicia's sister, Lisa had become an important part of her life. Lisa lived in California but visited New York every few weeks, and she shared stories about Alicia that helped Maya understand the mother she had never known. I'd love to meet her, Richard said. and Maya could hear the emotion in his voice. Will you ask her to bring any photos or stories about Alicia that she's comfortable sharing? I will. That evening, Maya was having dinner with David at their usual restaurant, a small Italian place near his garage that they had been going to since Maya was little. So Richard wants to meet Lisa tomorrow, Maya told her dad as they shared a plate of garlic bread. How do you feel about that? Nervous but good nervous. I think it will help him to hear about Alicia from someone who really knew her. David nodded. Over the past 3 months, he and Richard had developed an unexpected friendship. They had met several times, and David had been impressed by Richard's genuine remorse and his respect for the role David had played in Maya's life. You know, sweetheart, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you found him. Really? Really? You deserve to know where you came from, and he deserved to know what an amazing daughter he has, even if he missed out on raising you. Maya reached across the table and squeezed her dad's hand. You know you'll always be my real father, right? I know, and Richard knows it too. That man has a lot of respect for what we built together, you and me. The next evening, Maya arrived at Richard's penthouse apartment carrying a bottle of wine and feeling more comfortable than she had expected. Over the months, she had been here several times, and it was starting to feel familiar. Elizabeth greeted her at the door with a warm hug. Richard's ex-wife was an elegant woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an easy smile. Maya had been surprised by how welcoming Elizabeth had been. Maya, you look lovely, and you must be David, Elizabeth said, turning to greet Maya's father. Richard has told me so much about you. David, who had been nervous about meeting Richard's ex-wife, relaxed visibly at Elizabeth's warm greeting. And this must be Lisa, Richard said, approaching the group. Maya made the introductions, watching as Richard met Alicia's sister for the first time. Lisa studied Richard's face carefully before speaking. You look exactly like Alicia described you. She used to say you had kind eyes, even when you were being stubborn. Richard laughed, and Maya was surprised to see how much he seemed to need this connection to Alicia's memory. They gathered around Richard's dining table, which was set with fine china and fresh flowers. As they ate, Lisa shared stories about Alicia that painted a picture of a woman who was brilliant, funny, and deeply caring. She was always the smart one in our family, Lisa said. When she was in high school, she used to help other kids with their math homework. She said she wanted to work in finance because she liked the puzzle of making numbers tell a story. That's what drew me to her at work, Richard added. She could look at a spreadsheet and see possibilities that no one else noticed. Did she ever talk about me? Maya asked quietly, Lisa's eyes filled with tears.
Honey, she talked about you constantly.
Every birthday, every Mother's Day, every milestone you would have been reaching. She used to wonder if you were walking yet, if you liked school, if you were happy. She kept a journal, Lisa continued, pulling a small leather book from her purse. She wrote letters to you that she never sent. I brought it tonight because I thought you might want to have it. Maya took the journal with shaking hands, just holding something that her mother had touched, that contained her thoughts and feelings. Was overwhelming. She also left something else for you. Lisa reached into her purse again and pulled out a small jewelry box. This was our grandmother's necklace. Alicia always said that if she ever had a daughter, she would pass it down to her. Inside the box was a delicate gold chain with a small pendant shaped like a crescent moon. It matches your birthmark, Elizabeth observed, and Maya realized that the pendant was exactly the same shape as the mark she and Richard shared. Alicia wore this every day, Lisa explained. She said it reminded her of you and of the connection you shared with your father, even though you couldn't be together. Richard was quiet as Maya fastened the necklace around her neck. When she looked up, she saw that he was crying. She never forgot, he whispered. All these years I was afraid that she had moved on and forgotten about us. She never moved on, Lisa said gently. But she also never regretted her decision. She believed she had done what was best for you and for Maya, even though it broke her heart. As the evening continued, Maya found herself watching the interactions around the table. David and Elizabeth were discussing gardening, discovering they shared a love of growing vegetables. Richard and Lisa were looking through old photos of Alicia, with Lisa sharing memories and Richard seeing sides of Alicia he had never known. This is surreal, Maya said to the group. 6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I came from. Now I'm sitting at a table with my biological father, his ex-wife, my adoptive father, and my aunt I never knew existed. Is it too much? Richard asked, concern in his voice. No, it's not too much. It's just different. Good different. After dinner, as they were all preparing to leave, Richard pulled Maya aside. I have something to ask you, and I want you to feel completely free to say no. What is it? I've been thinking about the scholarship fund we set up in Alicia's name. It's doing well, helping young women pay for college, but I think it could do more. What do you mean? I want to create a foundation, something bigger that could help kids who are in foster care or who have been adopted. Kids who might be struggling with questions about their identity or their place in the world. Maya was intrigued. What kind of help? Counseling, educational support, mentorship programs, maybe even help reuniting families when appropriate. Richard paused. I was hoping you might consider running it. Maya was stunned. Me? You understand what it's like to grow up with questions about where you came from. You also understand what it's like to be loved by someone who chose you, not just someone who shares your DNA. That perspective is valuable. Maya looked around the room at the unconventional family that had somehow formed around their dinner table. David, who had raised her with unwavering love. Elizabeth, who had welcomed her despite their complicated history. Lisa, who had given her a connection to the mother she never knew. And Richard, who was trying to make up for 22 years of absence. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. 2 weeks later, Maya called Richard with her answer. She would run the foundation, but with some conditions. It would be based in Queens, not Manhattan, so it would be accessible to the communities that needed it most. David would serve on the board of directors, and the foundation would focus not just on adoption and foster care, but on celebrating all different kinds of families. Families come in all shapes and sizes, Maya explained to Richard. What matters isn't how they're formed, but how much love they contain. On the day the foundation officially opened, Maya stood in front of the small office building in Queens, looking at the sign that read, The Alicia Thompson Foundation, Supporting Families of Choice. David was on one side of her, Richard on the other. Your mother would be so proud, Richard said quietly. Both of my mothers would be proud, Maya corrected, thinking of the woman who had given birth to her and the mother figures who had helped shape her life. As they walked into the building together, Maya touched the crescent moon necklace at her throat and smiled. She had started this journey looking for a job, but she had found something much more valuable, a complete understanding of who she was and where she belonged. The birthmark on her wrist was no longer a mystery. It was a symbol of connection, a reminder that family isn't just about blood, but about choice, love, and the courage to build something new from the pieces of the past. Maya Johnson had found her biological father, but more importantly, she had discovered that she belonged to a family that was bigger and more complex and more loving than she had ever imagined possible, and that was worth more than any inheritance or job offer or social status could ever be.